Any effective implementation of leadership begins with believing in a grounded set of principles that you're disciplined enough to implement without wavering from your common goal. According to the Barna Group, which is an evangelical Christian polling firm, 34% of Christian CEOs and organizational leaders list their faith as a top influential decision-making factor when making decisions which affect the entire organization. They often place it alongside values such as integrity and service. Meanwhile, the group also says that a large majority identify as religious. However, only about 51% of these faith-forward leaders report that their faith actively impacts their decision-making. Meanwhile, another 25% say it isn't a factor at all. This is all information that my friend Dr. Michael Wright would like to consider and provide you his insights and opinion on. He's a Christian leadership executive coach, speaker, and expert who assists leaders of organizations to align their purpose, their faith, with effective strategy to create lasting impact. He's got decades of experience in organizational leadership and ministry development and executive coaching. He equips pastors, nonprofit leaders, and professionals to lead with clarity, integrity, and effectiveness. His work focuses on developing purpose-driven leaders, building healthy leadership systems, and helping organizations thrive while staying rooted in their biblical values. And Wright joined me this week to tell me more. I'm Kevin McShane. Let's have this conversation. Michael, if you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program on this Friday, and I'm super excited to learn about your journey in leadership development. It's great to see you, and happy Friday to you, my friend.
Happy Friday to you too. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Now, Michael, I don't know if you knew this, but January, my friend, happens to be National Mentoring Month, my friend, and as a leadership coach, I'm curious to start our conversation on what does effective mentoring mean to you, and why do you think it's important to celebrate mentors on a national level, my friend? Give me your perspective there, my friend.
Well, I didn't even know it was National Mentoring Month. So I learned something new today.
There you go.
I think effective mentorship, and I'm going to give you the biblical example, and then I'm going to give you my personal example.
Yeah, please.
If you look at how Jesus worked with the disciples, right? He spent time with them, not only teaching them, but also, I'm sure he spent time with them outside of the go preach stuff, right? But, he taught them, he loved them, he protected them, he provided for them, and he corrected them. And I think mentorship needs to be that, but then it also needs to be leading by example, right? If you're mentoring someone, you want them to have good character. You want them to have good, you want them to be people of integrity. You want them to be compassionate people. You want them to be passionate about what they're doing. But you can't teach someone that if you're not that way yourself.
Absolutely, yeah.
I had very early in my finance career, I had a really good mentor that pulled me into their office once a week, and we would find out where I'm at, what I'm having troubles with, and then work on those so that professionally I would grow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when I first started my business and got to the point where I could hire someone, I told him on the interview, I said, I'm going to hire you to do what I need you to do on a day to day basis. But I'm also going to teach you to do my job, which is essentially what Jesus did, right? I mean, he taught the disciples to do his job after the death, burial, and resurrection. After he's gone, then you guys are going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And she looked at me like I was crazy. Like, are you kidding me? I have no experience outside of school. I literally just graduated. I don't have my diploma yet, and you're going to teach me to do your job. And over time, very gradually, very slowly, and very consistently, I taught her to do my job, which then freed up my time to focus on bigger picture stuff and continue to grow the business. One of the things that I asked her in the whole after she was hired and stuff, I asked her, I said, how do you learn best? Do you learn from reading? Do you learn from being shown? Or do you learn from doing it yourself? And then I asked her something that I don't think a lot of employers ask people that they hire. And I told her, I said, my job is to set you up for success, whether it's you stay with my company long term or you're here for whatever season you're here and you move on. And I asked her, I said, so you let me know what success looks like for you and how I can help you get there. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
and then I gave her permission. I said, now in order for this to work, I'm going to have to hold you accountable, but you're going to have to hold me accountable. If we have a schedule that we get together once a week for a couple hours, then I'm going to make sure you're there, but you need to make sure I'm there too. And I think if we would incorporate that into leadership positions with the people that we lead, it's not just about successful at the organizational level, it's also success on a personal level, whether they stay there long term or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, I know that you are a Christian leadership expert and coach and executive coach, helping leaders combine their faith, purpose, and strategy, my friend, in order to leave a meaningful impact on life, my friend. So tell me about your work, my friend, and what makes you so fabulous.
Well, first, what we do, we focus on a few key things, and we start with a value-driven leadership. And through that process, we help them align character, conviction, and competence. And then from there, we pull in all these biblical concepts with wisdom and biblical leadership and biblical practices and how we treat people and how we treat our employees. And when we combine all that, now we put together the strategy. Okay, now we have all these tools. We have the biblical wisdom. We have the biblical principles on leadership. We found your compassion. You're leading with conviction. Now let's build strategies. Let's build growth strategies, not only for the organization, but from leadership down without being, we don't need to sit there and quote Bible verses and all this other stuff because maybe people don't share the same beliefs that we have. But the principles go across everything. And from there, we put in place a strategic plan to grow professionally, personally, and organizationally.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, I'm wondering if we can take a macro or a 360-degree view on effective leadership as it relates to inclusion in the workplace, Michael. You know, I talk to businesses about the importance of hiring folks with disabilities all the time and about the competitive advantage it can offer an organization. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on how inclusion can be viewed as a modern competitive advantage in the workplace. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Well, my thoughts are a little bit extensive, and if we don't mind going down a little road of American history, just briefly,
Please. Yeah, absolutely. Please go ahead.
I think, if we go back and we look at the history of the U.S., after the civil rights movement, after the women's rights movements, and now there are these two different populations that are entering the workforce, right? Prior to that, it was just men, white men in particular. And so we had to put processes in place. Back then, it was known as affirmative action. People getting hired on because of quotas, whatever. It ended up backfiring, in my opinion, because now we have people that are questioning, are you actually qualified to do the job or whatever. But the value of inclusion, and I think what we need to do is develop this software that we have that when you interview someone for a position, you can't see their face and their voice is masked. There's some sort of filter on that where everybody sounds the same. Then you hire them strictly on their qualifications, nothing else. I don't think, and for me, that's how I operate, right? It's like I don't care what your skin color is. I don't care, what your orientation may be, what your gender identity may be. None of that. It's can you do the job I'm asking you to do? It's that simple for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the term disabled to begin with. I think it's outdated, and I think it does people like you and some other people that I know personally a disservice.
Mm-hmm.
I think you may be abled differently or different abled than what I may be. For example, my stepson. It's not they don't call it this anymore, but he was diagnosed very early on in life with Asperger's syndrome, which is a highly functioning autistic person.
Yeah, it's autism. Yeah.
He has a hard time reading, but once you explain something to him, he doesn't forget it. He's borderline, what is it? Borderline audiographical memory. So when he was going through school, when he was going through college, which he just graduated from, we had to adapt how he studied. We had to get voice, stuff that would take text and convert it to voice.
Mm-hmm.
We had to read to him chapters of books and go over tests and all this other stuff. But now he's graduated with a degree in aviation mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
If you go back and look at it, there are some very talented people. Stephen Hawking's would be a notable one. Helen Keller would be a notable one. We may have to, as leaders, as employers, teachers, mentors, whatever, we may have to make different accommodations for people. But I don't think just because someone's in a wheelchair or someone's blind or someone's deaf, I don't think that automatically disqualifies them from doing a job.
Mm-hmm.
There's people out there, I'm sure, there's people out there that may be in a wheelchair or autistic or blind or whatever that is a lot better at things than I am. I've seen them. Like if you watch Paralympics, there's people out there skiing and playing football and all this other stuff. And I'm like, I can't ski. And I think we need to get to a point. I don't know if it's going to happen with my generation, but I think, as I look at things closely, I can start to see a shift in that where the younger generation, like my daughter, I got a daughter, she's 33. I think her generation they're going to be the ones that progress that a lot further ahead than what it is now. But like I said, that's just my belief. That's kind of what I see. I don't think people should be disqualified because they don't fit a certain stereotype that people are looking for. I think that's wrong on all kind of different levels.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Michael, I'm curious to ask you about your work, as a leadership ministry coach, where you help to coach and guide pastors and professionals to lead with clarity, integrity, and purpose, my friend. So, how do you do that on a consistent basis, and what does it mean to you to lead with clarity, integrity, and purpose, my friend? Tell me more.
So one of the things I do when I'm working with pastors and different leaders is clarity, but we'll start with purpose. What is your purpose for being where you're at, other than just a paycheck? There's got to be more to it than that. What led you to apply for the position? What led you to take the position? What is keeping you there? What is that purpose? With clarity, and sometimes I fail at this because I think faster than I talk sometimes. Can you communicate your purpose, the vision and the mission for where you're at with clarity so that the people you lead understand that? When it comes to integrity, for me, I make, I don't advertise it. I don't stand up and say, hey, I'm a pastor, I'm a Christian, but most people know that's what I am, right? They know that's my background. So for me, it's, do I live my life not only in public, but in private the same way? Do I carry the same values that I teach other people? Do I have those myself? If I say I'm going to come in and help you build systems, do I have systems in place myself? It's being who you are consistently, no matter what. I just had a conversation with a really good friend. I've known him about 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
He asked me to do something for him, and I really had to think about it. It wasn't anything bad, but I looked at it and I'm like, if I do this,
Mm-hmm.
am I compromising my integrity? I'm in the process now. I'm on the board of a nonprofit in Louisiana. I'm contemplating stepping down from that position and resigning my position on their board because there's a couple things going on that I didn't know about, and I for sure don't agree with. Ordinarily, it would be something that we could talk about, but it's an organization, it's a nonprofit organization that's ran by a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a couple of things going on with that I'm really looking at saying, okay, can we resolve this issue? And if not, I'm going to have to step down because it doesn't resemble it's not it doesn't resemble what you would think a person of faith or someone that stands up to say that they're a child of God and this is what guides us with what they've done. Nothing like sexual harassment or assault like that. It's more of a issue of integrity. So that's something I have to talk to him about and work through. And once we have that conversation, I'll make the decision. But when, and I don't want to get into a lot of details in case he sees this or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
it's just one of those things where there were some mistakes made in the beginning that has spilled over into other areas. And there's conversations as a leader he needs to have with people in his organization. There's a conversation I need to have with him based off of what he does that will determine what I do.
Yeah, and Michael, I am someone who firmly believes that, the first step to leadership, Michael, in my opinion, is fostering, cultivating great relationships. And, I think cultivating great relationships starts with people and investing in people because if they're invested in the same goal you are, we're rowing in the same boat, right? So
Yep. Yep.
Talk to me about relationship building and how important that is to effective leadership development.
I've actually seen both. I've seen leaders that were communicating their vision for whatever organization they were leading. They were sharing the financial information, maybe not the specifics of it, but they were definitely communicating, okay, this is what's going on, this is where we're at with the budget, this is where maybe we might have some shortfalls this quarter or whatever. So how are we going to, as an organization, how are we going to work through that? And what that does for me, it shows that the leadership is committed to the organization. And then with them being open and transparent and communicating and fostering relationships with the people that they lead, it's a stronger organization, right? It comes back to people don't care how much you know, but they know how much you care. And I think the more leadership genuinely, now let's not fake it, right? But if we honestly care about our team and those that we lead, they're going to be more productive and they're going to care more about the overall organization. On the other side of that coin, I've worked with leaders who kept everything close to their chest. They didn't share the vision with people, they didn't share the mission, they didn't share responsibilities, and it was basically one guy running a massive organization practically by himself out of the fear that if I share this with other people, if I share the vision, the mission, and all this other stuff, they're going to take it from me. They're going to leave and duplicate it someplace else. And it took a long time to get him to break that that thought process. He's not quite there yet. He's on his way. He's not so afraid that people's going to take it because I keep telling them, look, if they imitate it, that's great. Imitation is the best form of flattery. But if you want this thing to live past you, you have to share that vision with other people. If not, there's no reason for them to be there. They're just there for a paycheck.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, I also wanted to ask you about creating good habits because we are what we practice, my friend. So tell me, what do you think goes into creating great habits as an effective leader, my friend?
Hmm, a good question. I had a pastor when I got ordained. He told me, he goes, Michael, people will tell you to practice what you preach. And he says, but I'm going to teach, he goes, but me, I'm going to tell you to preach what you practice. He said, you can't really preach faith or love or discipline or anything else unless you do it yourself. So I think good habits are, you're taking care of yourself. You're making it a habit to check in with the people that you lead. Hey, how's everything going? Things like that, where these habits that you develop now trickle down to your staff. I had a woman that I was coaching. Her daily habit with her business was coming into work, checking her email, looking at her bank account, and going home. And then complaining about her staff not being there. And I had told her, I said, look, they're following your example. You have these habits that set in, you're not even there. You can't, if you're not there, you can't expect your staff to be there. Right? I mean, they're going to follow the habits of the person leading them. And I think, one habit that we should have as leaders, especially if you are a person of faith, that practice your faith at work. The Bible teaches us to not really be anxious for things, not to worry, not to doubt and stuff like that. If we're walking around as leaders full of tension and stress and doubt, our staff is going to do that too. I think getting, and I think now in this culture, there's this expectation, especially in larger companies, that no, you're going to work 10, 12, 16 hours a day because the leadership does. I think we need to break that. I think we need to make it a habit at work that no, if your schedule is 8 hours a day, leave after the end of 8 hours. You know,
Mhm.
I've worked for people that have told me, Michael, you need to take a vacation, um, because I was in the habit of not taking vacation. I was in the habit of work comes first, everything else comes second, and then I had to learn to turn that around. Work doesn't always come first. Family should come first.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, I'm also curious to ask you about you talked about systems earlier, and I also want to know how we can create systems, in your opinion, without compromising our biblical views or values, my friend, because I know it's important to you. And then I also want to know your opinion on purpose-driven leadership and how it can result in lasting change, my friend. What are your thoughts there?
Okay, so we'll go with purpose-driven leadership. Maybe I touched on it a little bit earlier, but I think if and I'll give you an example. Maybe this will answer the question better than me just rambling on some textbook stuff. Um, I had a good friend of mine. He pastored a church, and it was. Let me rephrase that. He was taking over a church. Him and his dad were. His dad was the senior pastor. He was the associate pastor, and they would every other week they would take turns preaching. And when the dad was there, the place was packed. When the son was there, nobody was there, which was odd. And him and I were talking one day as his dad was getting ready to transition out of the church and retire. I said, Chuck, what is what's your plan for this place? And he said, well, I'm gonna get this place packed full of people. Okay, how are you gonna do that? And he said, I'm gonna reach out to the community. Okay, how are you gonna do that?
Mhm.
He had a hard time answering that question. He had a vision for it, right? The vision is you fill up the place. Standing room only. There's no room for people to come inside. Admirable vision to have. But he didn't have a way to execute that. So for me, purpose driven leadership is two things. What is your reason for being there? And then how are you going to take the purpose for being there, aligning it not only with the vision of the organization and the mission statement of the organization, but how are you going to continue to grow it?
Mhm.
How are you going to continue to be a positive impact consistently on more people today than you were yesterday? The only way that can be accomplished is you have to understand what your purpose for being there is, anyways.
Mhm.
I've worked with companies as a consultant or as an employee. My purpose, and it's what drives me. It's like this is like I think my overall purpose, whether it was pastoring a church, public speaking, podcasting, books, whatever, is to leave people and organizations better today than what they were yesterday.
Mhm.
Um, One way or another, whether it's getting their finances in order or impacting leadership, putting systems in place, whatever. That's my purpose. That's what drives me. Which when I had my business kind of caused some questions with my contemporaries. They're like, Michael, you're doing all this work for people, but you're not charging enough. You're, you're giving stuff away to people. And I told them, I said, for me, it's never, I need to make money. My business needed to support me and my family. That was never my focus, though. My focus was, how many people have I helped? Have I helped enough? That answer has always been no, I haven't. I haven't I haven't passed on my experience. I haven't passed on insight. I haven't passed on expertise, I guess, to enough people yet. I probably never will. I will probably be called home to heaven and still say I have not helped enough people.
Mm-hmm.
That's my purpose. And I think if people find their purpose, again, beyond just a paycheck, beyond just saying, I'm the leader, I'm the guy, follow me. Even if you go back and look at Jesus, right? I mean, Jesus had a higher purpose.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just making disciples, it wasn't feeding the hungry, it wasn't healing the sick, it wasn't just casting out demons. There was a higher purpose. Everything he did, everything he said revolved around that single purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So as a leader, what is your purpose? And then everything you do should revolve around that purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Michael, I'm curious to ask you about, navigating our divided societal culture and how we can use things like faith, purpose, and strategy to help heal societal divisions and really get to a place of, for lack of a better term, compromise or a better sense of understanding, my friend. So, how do you think faith and our purpose can help us through the divided times that we're living in today? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I think, and I'm not going to blame the media too much, I'm not going to blame politics too much, but I think they have to take a little bit of responsibility. I also think churches and Christians in general need to take some of that responsibility. Here's why I say that. The neighborhood I lived in North Carolina, there's an intersection where there is a church on every single corner of that intersection. Now, they all say they believe in the same God. They all say they believe in the same Jesus. They all say that they're trying to reach the same community. But yet, they refuse to work together.
Mm-hmm.
They refuse to say we're in this together. It's almost where we've gotten to a point where it's every man for themselves in the name of Christianity. And now we have certain populations of people that have taken the original concept of it and warped it into something that is so far from biblical truth, they're not even worth listening to. There's people that are trying to take away the rights of citizens because that's their warped vision of Christianity. Jesus himself says, a house divided shall not stand, and a kingdom divided will fall. We cannot expect society to be united when God's house is divided.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of it is we see the person first, and I'll give you an example. I was at a store that a friend of mine worked at, and we were standing outside talking. his aunt or someone that he knew walked past us, and she was a woman pastor. She was a black woman pastor. And the three of us started talking. And she looked at me and she said, "When I look at you, I do not see a Christian first. I don't see a brother in Christ first. I see a white man first." Um, I was talking to a pastor a few years ago about, and it was right after 9/11 happened, shortly thereafter, um, where there was a predominant radio station. It was a nationwide radio station with a very predominant pastor on there. And he made the comment that all Muslims are terrorists and they need to be killed. I turned my radio off and I'm like, you know what? That is garbage. Complete garbage. So I told this pastor about it and I said, look, I have a good friend of mine who's Muslim. I know for a fact he's not a terrorist. And I said, when him and I talk, we focus on what the two different belief systems have in common, not what separates us. It's a long-winded way of saying all of us, regardless of religion, regardless of race, regardless of educational status, regardless of socioeconomic status, regardless of the neighborhood we live in, if we talk to each other, we're going to find we have things in common.
Mm-hmm.
If we focus on what we have in common and start the conversation there, that's where we begin to heal. And that's where the unification happens. The unification doesn't happen because of hate. The unification cannot happen if we consistently find things to keep us divided. We need to focus more on what we have in common.
And Michael, I'm curious to circle back to workplace culture, or organizational culture, for just a second, because our friends over at Barna last year, they did a study and a survey that found that 89% of CEOs who identify as Christian say that their faith plays a very big role in making organizational and life decisions, my friend. And I'm wondering your thoughts on the importance of letting your faith guide your decisions at work and what you make of those findings, my friend.
I could believe that to be true. I think we're at a point in this country where people are a little bit more open about their faith than they were maybe 10, 15 years ago. For me, if I'm going to say that I'm a pastor, that I teach biblical concepts, then I have to make decisions based off of those same very biblical principles. I have to make decisions saying, okay, we're going to do this. I don't know how, but I know it's going to work. I have to make the decisions based off of what I feel and what I believe and what some people would say are what your instincts, right? I think instincts is just another way of saying what's God telling you to do. Um, so it doesn't really surprise me all that much. But I think if you're going to be the Bible says, no matter what you do it for the honor and glory of God. And I don't know how we can stand up and say that we're a person of faith and we lead an organization, but then the decisions we make don't honor Him.
Mm-hmm. Michael, I'm also curious to ask you about, how organizations, in your opinion, can help formulate or foster what I call future focused leaders, leaders who are focused on respecting the past, but also looking at how we become a forward thinking society. I'm curious to get your thoughts there, my friend.
So I think one of the steps we can take to be forward thinking or forward moving organizations is we we have challenges today. So let's solve those challenges, but let's also put something in place. Let's not wait 5 years before we implement different programs that we think we may need in 5 years. Let's do those now. An example of that would be I was talking to a gentleman that was just starting his nonprofit organization. It got a little bit out of control for him because he worked full time, had a couple other things going on the side, and had this nonprofit. And he kept saying, well, when the time comes that I need to hire a secretary, I'll hire a secretary. Or I've seen pastors say, when I need to have a secretary or when I need to have a youth pastor and a choir and all this other stuff, I'll do it then. And I kept telling him, no, you're not. You are not going to do it then. Because if we plan to do something 5 years down the road, 2 years down the road, a week down the road, there's going to be something that comes up that prevents us from doing it. There's going to be other priorities that take place. There's going to be other things we need to do. So one of the things we can do to be a forward thinking or forward moving organization, what you say you're going to do a year from now, do it now. Mm-hmm. If you do it now, you can do it in small incremental steps. So a year down the road, you have the systems in place. You have the accountability in place. You have the leadership in place to accomplish that flawlessly or as close to perfectly as you can be. Mm-hmm. If you wait and throw it together then, you're going to miss something. You're going to have the wrong people in the wrong place. You're not going to have systems. You're not going to have accountability. And it diminishes the odds of success.
Yeah. I've got two questions left for you too, Michael. And the first, I wanted your opinion on this marriage poll that came out in 2025 that said that 47% of Americans value faith at work, but 61% don't let it affect, now I'm talking about the general public, their job or their shopping choices, and most are comfortable sharing their religious beliefs. But notably, young people are less influenced by faith, and when it comes to making workplace or workforce decisions, my friend. So I was just curious about getting your insights on that data and what you make of that information, my friend.
So I think I'm going to focus on the younger generation. Yeah. I think with the younger generation, they're open to the influence of it as long as it's a subtle influence and not very overt, right? Mm-hmm. The name of my consulting company was Proverbs 24:3 Consulting. Proverbs 24:3, with wisdom a house is built, and with understanding it's established. I hired this girl, and she comes to work, and I have Christian music on and some other things. I really didn't have like a lot of Christian artwork and stuff up. I had one poster that said "Stay calm and carry on." And through this process, as I'm working with her and teaching her and mentoring and stuff, she says to me one day, she goes, "Michael, I never thought that I was going to get the job I was looking for. She goes, I have 3 kids. My husband's in the military. He's gone a lot. So I have to work the hours that my kids are in school because of childcare costs and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes, and then you call me, and the name of your company kind of shocked me a little bit because I don't have a lot of faith. Um, but here you are, you're offering me this job where I'm working 30 hours a week and I get to pick the 30 hours that I'm working, whether they're in the office or at home. And I'm starting to maybe wonder if there isn't a God or a higher power. But it wasn't overt, right? It was just this, it was who I was. And I think that the younger generation is they're influenced by it. They're just not influenced by the forcefulness of it. I think the younger generation, if we're too forceful with them, back off a little bit. There was actually some studies that was done in Christianity Today that talked about why the younger generation aren't staying in, they're not staying at church very long. Part of that was they're not learning the structure, they're not learning the doctrines. But I think when we look at the influence, so we have to look at 2 things. One, what of faith, what does influence them? What parts of the faith does influence them? And then what parts do they kind of shy away from? I don't know if that answered your question or not. I know my daughter is 33 years old.
Mm-hmm.
She is very quiet about her faith. She doesn't brag about it too much. She doesn't really share it too much. She's just back there quietly doing her thing, but it's faith driven. So I'm kind of wondering if, as far as the workplace and stuff go, is it being confused because they're not overtly sharing it? Or is there something else going on? But I would tend to think that they're influenced by it if it's done, let's say the more, for lack of a better way, politically correct, the more subtle, maybe not outlandish, oh look at me and stuff like that. I think they would be more influenced that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Michael, I'm curious to end by asking about your personal and professional legacy, my friend, and how do you want that to be defined?
I Wow, that is a very tough question for me. Um, I have lived this very strange, crazy, miraculous life. I don't want my legacy to be about how much money did Michael make, what kind of material possessions did he make or did he have. I want to be remembered by how many people did I have a positive impact on,
Mm-hmm.
no matter how big, no matter how small. Um, did I, how many people did I cross paths with
Mm-hmm.
that I made a difference in a positive difference in their life? The irony is, I'll never know, right? Like, I'll never know until I stop. I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. Whether I retire from work or not, there's always going to be a part of me that says, one more person. There's one more person that I can reach. There's one more person that I can make a difference with.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. An example of that would be that in 2020, I was approached by someone and they said, I want to nominate you for the Presidential Lifetime Achievement Medal. And I said, absolutely not. And they asked me why. And I said, look, I didn't do it for that. I didn't go to school to get the education I got. for me, right? I didn't put in all those hours of helping people for free for public recognition. I did it because they needed the help and I could give them the help. And it took them a while to convince me to accept it. And I told them, I said, I'll accept it in one condition. If you can't meet that condition, no. And I said, no fanfare, no press, no big dinner, no big party. I'll get my wife and kids together. I'll thank her. I'll thank the people that helped make it possible. I'll thank you for giving it to me. I'll shake your hand. Maybe we go have dinner. Maybe I go home and be with my family. I don't know that part yet. If you can do that, then I'll take the award. So they gave me the award. And the funny thing is, unless I tell people, they don't even know I have it. But I don't tell people that to brag. I never did it for that. You know, it was just because there were people that needed help that I can give it, and I can give it to them. That's what I want my legacy to be. That he helped as many people as he possibly could, and then some. To me, that's what matters.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
know, 200 years from now, people aren't gonna really remember me. They're not gonna read my books. They're not gonna listen to my podcast anymore. Hopefully 10, 15 years after I pass, people will remember. But if people remember one thing about me, it's like, you know, I stood up for what I believed in, never wavered from it, even if it would have given me a financial gain. Um, and just that I did everything I could to help other people. It's always been about other people, not me.
Yeah, absolutely. And my friend, tell me if people want to get connected with you, what's the best way they can do that?
My website is drmwright.com. On there, you'll find a lot of blogs about leadership, faith, personal growth. I am working on getting my podcast back up. I kind of took a break from all this and archived a lot of stuff, so now I'm digging through all my audio files to put some of the best ones up there. I'm working on some new ones. I'm also working on, I will be on Kingdom Purpose TV here in a couple weeks, every Wednesday from 6 to 7. Speaking of which, I would love to have you as a guest on my show and my podcast.
Absolutely. I'd love to accept the invitation, my friend. We should make a date, my friend. Absolutely. And Michael, I want to thank you for being here today to share me to share with me rather your perspective on leadership, faith, and purpose, my friend. Your work in the space is most appreciated. I want to thank you for engaging in conversation and for being here this afternoon. It's most appreciated.
And thank you for allowing me to be here. I enjoyed it and I really appreciate it.